Good afternoon. In a seismic shift reshaping global trade, Trump's abrupt announcement of 30% tariff on EU and Mexico imports has ignited alarm from Brussels to Mexico City, with France Macron vowing a firm EU response, Germany urging calm, and Mexico caught in a diplomatic tightrope. Markets reel as Wall Street falters and emerging economies brace for fallout. Is this a prelude to a full-scale trade war or just political theater amid a heated U.S. tariff surge? I'm Mona Mosalhi and welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
Well, welcome back. The Arkansas Democrat Gazette has reported that President Donald Trump announced 30% tariffs on imports from the European Union and Mexico, set to begin in August, reigniting fears of a global trade war. Framed as a bid to rebalance U.S. trade deficits and secure economic sovereignty, the move has sparked widespread concern among global leaders. European leaders, including Macron and von der Leyen, condemned the decision, vowing to defend EU interests and warning of retaliatory measures. Meanwhile, Mexico's President Sheinbaum called for calm and dialogue despite labeling the tariffs unfair. The potential fallout threatens to disrupt billions in daily trade, strain transatlantic ties, and ripple through global markets, raising concerns over inflation and economic instability at a volatile geopolitical moment. Now, according to The Guardian, French President Emmanuel Macron has urged the European Union to resolutely defend its economic interests in the face of Trump's threatened 30% tariff, signaling readiness for a potential trade war. His firm stance contrasts with calls for calm from leaders in Germany, Italy, and Ireland, who advocate pragmatic negotiations before the August 1st deadline, while Macron pushes for credible countermeasures, including anti-coercion tools. Berlin emphasized diplomacy, stressing the need for a swift, pragmatic resolution. Meanwhile, Italian industry voices caution, fearing severe impacts on exports like wine and automobiles, already vulnerable to U.S. tariff hikes. The EU now faces internal divisions and mounting pressure as trade ministers prepare for critical talks. With transatlantic tensions escalating amid global instability, the bloc must balance firmness with flexibility to avoid economic retaliation that could ripple across markets and industries. Meanwhile, the New York Times highlights that faced with Trump's sweeping tariff threats, Asian nations are scrambling to diversify their trade ties and reduce dependence on the U.S. market. From Malaysia to Vietnam, leaders are forging regional alliances and deepening economic partnerships in a bid to cushion potential blows. Countries like South Korea, Indonesia, and India are accelerating trade talks with partners in Asia, Europe, and Latin America, seeking alternative amid growing U.S. unpredictability. Bilateral deals and regional pacts gain urgency as traditional export routes face disruption. This strategic shift echoes past responses to U.S.-China trade wars, where supply chains rerouted rather than collapsed. As Washington retreats into protectionism, global economies are recalibrating, seeking stability beyond Trump's tariff storm. President Trump shocks global markets with a surprise push for 30% tariff on EU and Mexican imports, sparking fears of a new trade war just weeks before the August 1st deadline.
In a dramatic escalation that has sent shockwaves through global markets and capitals, President Donald Trump has once again unleashed his signature weapon in foreign economic policy, tariffs. With just weeks before they could take effect, Trump's surprise announcement of 30% tariffs on imports from the European Union and Mexico starting August 1st raises urgent questions. Is this a negotiating tactic, or is the world on the brink of a new trade war? But these tariffs aren't just about trade balance. Trump has tied them to issues like fentanyl trafficking, accusing Mexico of failing to stop cartels. Meanwhile, he demands total market access from the EU, ignoring its already low average tariff rate of 2.8% compared to America's 2.2%. Europe's response was swift. The European Commission president warned that the tariffs will disrupt transatlantic supply chains, while French President Emmanuel Macron urged the bloc to prepare countermeasures if no deal is struck by August 1st. Meanwhile, in Mexico, officials called the move unfair treatment, emphasizing ongoing negotiations. President Claudia Sheinbaum, who has deployed thousands of troops to combat cartels, finds herself caught between diplomacy and domestic pressure. Markets reacted nervously, recalling the April 2025 plunge when stocks fell 12% in days after similar tariff threats. Economists warn that while importers and producers have absorbed much of the cost so far, consumers may soon face higher prices for everyday goods. Trump's approach remains erratic. He paused earlier tariffs for 90 days, then resumed them with even steeper rates, now including 35% on Canada and 50% on Brazil, and threats against over 60 nations. His administration claims it seeks reciprocity, but allies question U.S. credibility. As tensions mount, one thing is clear: Trump is redrawing the map of global trade, not with ink, but with tariffs.
Right, for more analysis about the most recent updates concerning Trump's new tariffs and its implications, we're joined from Washington by Mr. Peter Tanis, Chairman of Linux Investment Advisory, and from Kentucky by Dr. Hussein Al-Khatib, Political Science Professor. Good evening to you, gentlemen, and welcome to Think Tank. Let me here start with Mr. Tanis, and with Wall Street already rattled by Trump's 30% tariff threat on EU and Mexican imports, how deep could the financial fallouts be if these tariffs, be if these tariffs become a reality?
Nice to be with you, Mona. Let me answer that on several levels. First of all, in some cases, there's less here than meets the eye. The first side effect that is really interesting of these new tariffs is that in the case of Mexico, Trump is using this not for trade, but as a foreign policy initiative. Did you see the reason why he's imposing tariffs on Mexico? It's not because of trade. It's because he doesn't think the president of Mexico has done enough to prevent drugs from flowing into the United States, and he wants her to do more. That is also interesting. Side effect is that when Trump was in office the first time, he established a trade pact with Mexico, the USMCA. And the USMCA exempts over 80% of the trade with the imports from Mexico from duties. And the White House has indicated that the USMCA still is in effect. So the bottom line, as far as Mexico is concerned, is that there's very little going on here. As far as the EU is concerned, obviously that could be more serious. And as your announcer pointed out, when these tariffs were first announced in April, the U.S. stock market crashed and went down over
Mm,
10%. But look what's happened recently. The market is hitting new highs, so we're getting used to this.
really, that's interesting to understand. Professor Khatib, what message does Trump's sudden tariff escalation send to America's traditional allies in Europe and Latin America?
The issue with Trump is that he considers that he has a mandate. He wants to change business as usual. And he said it's a transitions, and it's a transition, and transitions are not easy. The message that he sends to the whole world is that it's going to be things are going to be done differently. That trade imbalance, the discrimination against American products, reciprocity, all of these are factors now in the way he deals with the rest of the world. But really, the main issue I think is that the major chunk of the trade imbalance is really with two entities, the EU and with China. And he said that the EU sometimes is even worse than China. So these are the two big cases that he has to deal with, and that will really affect the economy. The rest are not as important.
Right, Mr. Tanis, you spoke about the markets going high. Now, given that Trump has previously posed similar measures for negotiations, do you see this as another high stakes negotiating tactics or a genuine shift towards protectionism?
Yeah, I think the first part of what you said, Mona, is the answer. It is really a negotiating tactic. And as I said earlier, we're getting kind of used to this. The fact is that Trump knows that most foreign countries need the United States market. So trying to regulate tariffs, use tariffs to make sure that what he considers a fair deal is enacted. That's one side of it. So the biggest clue, the biggest indicator of all this is to watch the US stock market. If the US stock market doesn't go down precipitously, it's basic. The financiers are basically sending the message that we've been here before. We're getting used to Trump's strategy. He's going to work something out. He's going to make these threats, and he's going to work something out with the EU, just like he has so far done with China, although that's not over, and with a few other countries. Just if the stock market goes down precipitously,
Mm,
like it did in April, that will be sending a message that we're really concerned. I don't think that's going to happen.
mm. Dr. Khatib, from your point of view, is this move part of a broader strategy to reshape global alliances or simply a domestic political tool?
He's not trying to reshape alliances. I mean, the Europeans are America's allies, and the relationship is very deep. It's an outlook, it's a way of seeing the world. He thinks that the world has been taken advantage of the United States, and the United States is a huge market, and these countries need to sell in the U.S., but they have been disadvantaging American products with high tariffs from their end and low tariffs from the U.S. end have discouraged manufacturing in the U.S. Imagine a policy that discourages manufacturing inside the U.S. that and foreign and these other countries they discriminate against American products by having high tariffs, and the logic is that reciprocity. We put the same tariff as you have. That's not being unfair to you. And if he has high tariffs, his logic is that there'll be manufacturing in the U.S. These manufacturers will locate in the U.S. and generate jobs, and he thinks it's fair and it's good to the American people. He's not trying to change any alliances because he's treating China the way he's treating the EU. He's not saying that the EU is a special case, or even
And
Israel.
isn't this a kind of change of alliances? I mean, the European or the EU is being treated the same as he is treating the China. Is
Yeah, that's a good question because it's not, he's always accused of being racist. He's really, if you look at this policy, the race is not an issue, the politics is not an issue. He's looking at trade imbalances. He said this is not sustainable. He said sometimes the EU is even worse than China. And a lot of people talk about China when they think of imbalances, talk about imbalances, but really there's a huge imbalance also with the EU, and the EU has not been fair to US manufacturers. That's what he thinks. So it's really not political. He's a businessman. He's looking at the world as a business transactional, and he thinks that this deal that his predecessors had with the Europeans was not fair to the US. He thinks that the EU is not being fair to the US, taking advantage of the US, and he thinks no country should take advantage of the US.
indeed, but it has always been that economy shapes and reshape the alliances from different frameworks. Let me go here to Mr. Tannison. How will Trump's tariff strategy affect investors' confidence in the U.S. stability, particularly amid rising inflationary pressures and global supply chain disruptions? What do you think?
We'll just have to wait and see, but so far so good, because the investor perception so far is that Trump is winning in terms of his strategy, because he'll impose these tariffs, get a lot of attention, just like we're talking about them, and then announce a few weeks later, oh, we just made a terrific deal with the EU, with China, Vietnam, with etc. And now the tariffs are going to come down. We have a terrific deal, and we won, and so everything is going to be fine. The this this is what has hoped for, and pretty much what has happened up to now. But when we talk about tariffs, it's also important to keep in another aspect of this that is very important and we don't talk about enough. Remember that Trump has said he's opposing a baseline tariff of 10% on everything. Everything that comes into this country will have a 10% tariff on it. The reason he's done that is twofold. Number one, 10%, because he doesn't think, and he may be right, that that amount will be inflationary, that will stoke inflation. The second reason is we need the revenue. And this is very important because our deficit problems in the United States have become out of control. We spend $1 trillion a year just on interest on the debt, and that has got to be brought under control. So a 10% tariff on everything that's into the United States is going to help reduce that. It's estimated that will bring in over $250 billion a year. So that's one part of it that we also need to keep in mind.
So we're speaking here about you seeing this as a genuine solution to indoors or to the United States inside economy, right? We'll get back to you, Mr. Tanis, about that, but let me here go to Dr. El-Khatib. And how does Macron's firm stance reflect a changing EU posture towards US pressure compared to Germany or Italy with more cautious approach?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tradition for France to have these positions as to the US. They always think that France is a competing power and a leadership position in the EU. And traditionally, they try to distinguish themselves from the rest of the Europeans in dealing with the US. But really, I mean, they pragmatically, I mean, whenever you have a deal between two people and you're trying to change things and the noises are coming from one side, then you know that this side has a really good, and no one who has a really good deal wants to renegotiate it to have a fair deal to the other side. So this is what's happening. The EU had it good for a long time. When you want to make it fair, they think it is unfair to have it a fair arrangement. So I think there'll be noises, and I don't think France is in a position really to impose its will on the EU or to really change the Trump approach.
Mr. Danis, you said that indoors or in the U.S. Domestic economy, things are not really are not changing anyway. So, but in the economy of the U.S. On the broader side, what do you think would be the sectors that would suffer the most if retaliatory tariffs hit America's exports to Europe and Mexico?
Yeah, remember what I mentioned earlier, over 80% of the Mexican imports are exempt. But if that were not the case, we import a great many automobiles from Mexico. A lot of American manufacturers make cars in Mexico. There's also agricultural trade, avocados and other agricultural items that come from Mexico that would have an effect. But as I said earlier, Mona, I don't think Mexico's a big deal. Again, because over 80% of the products are exempted. And again, remember, he did this for political reasons, for foreign policy reasons, not for trade reasons. So Mexico is going to be resolved very quickly. The EU is more dramatic. It will take a lot more effort. Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, will probably be very much involved in the negotiations. He's probably Trump's smartest cabinet member, and Trump listens to him. And one has to be optimistic that this is going to work out at some level before the August 1st deadline. Part of the problem, of course, is that in July and August, Europe pretty much closes down. Everybody goes on holiday. So I hope they can manage to get them off the beach and start talking again.
You said that those are strategic decisions taken for foreign policy. Dr. Khatib, on the other hand, said that they were mere economy. Now, if I go to Dr. Khatib here and Mexico's president here, Mr. Danis, said that percent of what U.S. imports from Mexico are exempted, but here the Mexican president Sheinbaum has called tariffs unfair. And does this mark a turning point in the U.S.-Mexico relations after years of cooperation on migration and security? What do you have on that?
I mean, in general, you asked me about alliances, that he's not looking at this as an ally, this is an adversary. He's treating China and the EU the same way. That was my point. As to the Canadians and the Mexicans, there is a special situation for them because of the trade agreement with them, as your guest from Washington mentioned. So the relationship with Mexico has ups and downs. The Mexicans always complain about weapons being smuggled from the U.S. to Mexico, and the U.S. complaining about drugs getting in from Mexico. So this is all the problem, the border and relations between the two countries. I think it will be resolved, but it's a special relationship with the Mexicans and with the Canadians, and it's a different dynamic than that with the EU and with China and with the rest of the world as well. But as to the economic consequences of what Trump is doing, actually, some economists are almost unanimous that it's a very game, that inflation is highly possible, that is in check because a lot of the products were already brought to the country before the tariffs were imposed, and that the sellers have not really been increasing their prices, but it's possible that we'll see inflation in the future. Now, inflation is under check, but it's possible to have inflation building up. This is why the Federal Reserve refused to decrease interest rate, because they said that it's an uncertain time. There are troubling signs, there are good signs, but because of being unsure about which way the economy is moving, they refused to decrease the interest rate, and that made Trump angry. But most economists are really very pessimistic and very concerned about the economic the direction of the economy.
Mr. Danis, how might Asian economies or do you think that Asian economies like Vietnam and India benefit strategically from Trump's alienation of the traditional U.S. Partners?
Yeah, if I understood the question correctly, Mona, I think the Asian countries, particularly those with whom we trade a great deal, China and Vietnam come to mind, have to be very concerned. China in particular, because of course they're one of our largest trading partners, and because they have a lot of internal problems of their own. So there is an incentive to work these out for various reasons on both sides. We depend on China for all the rare earths that we need in so many strategic manufacturing operations,
No.
automobiles, defense, and other areas that are terribly important. So, because of the necessity of solving this, one has to be optimistic that it will work out. On the inflation side, remember that if we have high tariffs on items that we import from abroad, this will exacerbate inflation because, as Fed Chairman Powell has said, he's not willing to reduce interest rates until he sees what effect this will have.
Actually, Mr. Danos, what I meant here, that would Asian economies such as Indian one or the Vietnam one, they can benefit from Trump changing alliances and his changing policies towards his own allies.
Yeah, in fact, India is a good case because some manufacturing is moving to India. I think Apple is a very good example of that. So it is true that they could benefit if some of these issues aren't resolved. And India, of course, the largest population in the world, a very tech-oriented economy, and another advantage is they speak English. So India is a big player, and you're quite right to ask that question. And indeed, there could be some advantage for India if there is a major rupture with China and some of the others. But I don't think that's going to happen.
And it depends on the English speaking. Let me here go to Dr. Khatib. Do you think Trump's actions would accelerate the formation of alternative trade blocs outside Western dominance?
I think the bottom line is that the size of the U.S. economy, the size of the U.S. market, the importance of the U.S. The Chinese can't find an alternative market to the U.S. The EU-U.S. relationship is too deep, too important for them to be looking somewhere else. So this is the outlook that Trump has, is that you've been unfair to us, that you've been taking advantage of us, that this is not right. And even if the EU, our friends, should not be treating us the way they did. And he's treating everybody equally. He just said, let's come to the table and let's make fair deals as to the US. Tariffs high on your end, low on our end. Manufacturing leaves the country. You bring the goods back. People lost their jobs. We have the Rust Belt. We had deindustrialization over these decades. That should not continue. Business as usual. It's not. He wants to change things. He wants to encourage manufacturing in the U.S. So it's really not directed at any country. It's not a policy against any country. It's not a policy for any country except the U.S. He thinks he's an American nationalist. A lot of people were hurt by deindustrialization. People with capital, they benefited. They had no sense of belonging. They said, oh, well, we make things cheaper overseas and then we bring them back here. And whoever lost their job, too bad. Let them do something else and work in the services, but it doesn't really pay well. So it's really not about changing alliances or like getting at a certain country. It's just that his outlook is that he's a deal maker. These deals that the U.S. had with the rest of the world were not good. We have to change them so that they're fair to the U.S. And it's not for India. It's not against India. It's not against or for any other country. It's just serving whom he represents. He is the American president. He promised to have a better economy, better jobs, and he's trying to deliver on that from his point of view.
All right, that was Mr. Peter Tanis, Chairman of Linux Investment Advisory, and Dr. Hassan Al Khatib, Political Science Professor. We thank you both, gentlemen, for your special insights in this valuable, very valuable discussion. And in a world on the edge of a new trade war, alliances are tested, economies affected, and the global order hangs in the balance. I guess that brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of our changing world. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.